So welcome to our 6th Tuesday talk. It's delightful to be back with you all today. And I'm going to be following on today from our talk 3 weeks ago where we went into the West and Central Africa. And I'm going to be moving today into what I consider to be one of the most authentic safari destinations in Africa, and that is Zambia. It's also a destination that I've known for many, many years. I've been traveling to Zambia for over 24 years, and I have an absolute passion for this country and for the wonderful safari experiences that it does offer. While we wait for all the registrations to join us, I just wanted to give you a quick update on my road trip that some of you might have been following on Facebook, and actually that Mark got to enjoy because I came to visit him in the Karoo, where we froze our butts off for a few days, but it was absolutely fantastic. So 3 weeks ago, I was in Johannesburg visiting my brother, and since then we've been up to Ant's Nest to visit Aunt Baba. And all of this, I have to tell you, has been done on a really good conservation and an essential services permit that we've been getting around South Africa on. From Ant's Nest, we went over to Marataba, which is one of the new client that we're working with, and I'm going to be launching their conservation camps in the next few weeks. While we were there, we did the most wonderful live impala capture, which was all done from helicopter, where they shot nets from the helicopter onto 30 different impala, and those impala were then moved up into the Madikwe Game Reserve. From Marataba, I visited a friend outside Warm Baths, and then last week we got into Hoedspruit, and I'm now staying with Don and Nina in their beautiful home in Hoedspruit and heading off to Tandatula once we finish with this, well, not finish, but tomorrow I'm going to be heading off to Tandatula for a few days to go and see what's happening on that side. So just while I'm talking about that, just listening at our South African properties, we do have extremely good reignite rates. We did issue those yesterday, but for anybody that has got a South African client base, we do have reignite rates, and we are able to offer the option to get business permits to travel. So please, if you did not receive the email yesterday, please do get in touch with me, and I'll make sure that you do get those rates as well. So the COVID situation in South Africa continues to be rather depressing. As we're seeing little light at the end of the tunnel on this side. But I am being very positive about the way forward and where things are going, and certainly taking this time as well to really be thinking about what the future looks like of our businesses. And the past as we know it has definitely gone, and we certainly do need to consider what does the future of safaris look like. And how will our businesses adapt to this going forward as well? Will you be having the same experiences that you did before COVID, or are you going to be looking for new experiences going forward? 3 weeks ago, we spoke about the Congo Basin, where we covered the Odzala in the Republic of Congo. We went up to Zanzibar in the Central African Republic. We had the Gabon wildlife camps joining us from Gabon, and we also did Principe. The feedback from that session has been absolutely fantastic, and it's been fascinating to see that there's this deep yearning for more authentic adventures. That takes me back to the question that I was asked this weekend as I was doing a really big power walk with some friends. They said, if I could be anywhere right now and I could teleport myself to any destination, where would I choose to be? And without even thinking about it, maybe it was the fact that we were doing a really big walk at the time, I said, I would be in Zambia. Without a doubt, I would be walking in Zambia, feeling the sun on my back, smelling the bush all around and hearing those sounds. But to be able to get to Zambia now would be an absolute gift. And I think on that note, my question to all of you today, and this is a new thing I'm trying, guys, so help me over here, but we are going to ask you, have you been to Zambia before? And have you sold Zambia before? So we're launching a poll now, and you will have a chance to answer those questions. So we're just going to wait for those questions to be answered. While you're answering that, though, the one thing that I did also notice extremely is in doing our sales, in terms of sales calls that I've been to, as well as when I've been at trade shows, when I go through our portfolio and we have 12 different African countries, the one thing I've always spoken about is we start chatting about our destinations in Kenya, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia, and all these things. Then I start saying, and what about Zambia? They go, oh, Zambia, that's a bit of a difficult one to sell. Our clients don't really want to do walking safaris, and it isn't good. So, okay, and I kind of go through it a little bit faster. And they say, okay, well, in that case, I'm sure you're not going to want to go to the Congo. No, they say. We want to hear all about the Congo. Our clients are definitely interested in the Congo. And I've come to say to them, hang on, You're not allowed to sell the Congo if you haven't sold a safari in Zambia, as far as I'm concerned. You can't skip Zambia and just go straight to the Congo, where you think your clients are going to be comfortable walking in waist-deep water with mud all around, and you can't sell a great safari in Zambia? No can do. So we've really been really positive about what Zambia does offer. And I'd like to know how you're going to be selling more of Zambia going forward in the future as well. So I'm going to be ending the poll in a few seconds. So if you can just finish on that side, that would be great, guys. Okay. And I would like to then introduce you. I'm just going to put up onto our screen sharing as well now and get up onto this. Hold on. Okay. So our panelists today, I'm very happy to introduce you to are, we've got, first of all, starting off with Fanuel, who I've known for many years, who is a guide and a camp manager at Chamalandu for the Bush Camp Company. We then have Grant Cummings, the owner of Chiawa Safaris. And we've got Tyrone McKeith from Jeffrey and McKeith Safaris up in the Kafui and the Lua Plains. And I'm very happy to introduce you to Mark Mcadam, a new partner at the Remote Africa Safaris. So starting off, just want to have a look at the destinations that we're going to be covering today as well. So the starting point for any big safari in Zambia is going to be Lusaka. That's your main entry and access point into this area. From there, we're going to go into the lower Zambezi. These are the areas we're concentrating on today. The South Luanga, the North Luanga, Bangwelu swamps, which is a really exciting new destination, which I was really fortunate to visit a few years ago. From there, we're going to go into the Kafui and a little bit into Lua Plains as well. Looking at these, I just want to give you an idea of where you are in terms of the products that we're talking about today. The Bush Camp Company has got 6 camps, all situated in the southern part of the South Luangwa National Park, with Mfui Lodge as well in the main, as the main access point. And then Chiawa Safaris with Grant. Here we have Chiawa and Omodoro in the Lower Zambezi National Park, one of my ultimate favorite destinations, the most beautiful escarpment over here within this area. And then Grant has recently opened up Chicheli Lodge and Puku Ridge up in the southern part of the South Luangwa. And then we have Remote Africa Safaris. And just rewinding on that side, both Grant and Andy from Chiawa and the Bush Camp Company have been Classics members, I think, since early 2000. Grant, I actually went on into tried to go back into my files and try and find a contract, but it was before we had Dropbox or anything. And I actually can't remember the year that you joined, but I think it was 2001 or 2002, but it was a long time ago. Can you remember it all?
I can't, because back in those days, contracts were done on a handshake and a tequila shot.
Exactly that. I can't find a contract at all. And then the next one I don't have any contract for was the Remote Africa Safaris. And actually Remote was one of the first members of what was then Classic Retreats in those days. So Remote has got the Tufika and the Chikoko walking trails in the southern part of the south, in the northern part of the South Luangwa, Moleshi, up in the North Luangwa, and they're going to be opening up camps, which Mark is going to tell us about in the Bangwelu swamps. And then a very newcomer onto our thing, and I've spoken to Tyrone a few times, but I've actually never met him in person, and I've never visited his camps. All the destinations I've just spoken about, I know quite well, but when it comes to the Kafui and Lua areas, it's not my stomping ground whatsoever. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you on that side, Tyrone. But Tyrone's got his camps in Kafui and out in the Lua National Parks as well. So those are the areas that we are covering today. And what I thought I would just do is just give you a brief introduction to people individually. So the first one we have is Fanuel. And Fanuel, you're going to do a little bit of an intro from your side. But just so that you know, Fanuel, as I mentioned, is a guide and a camp manager at Chamalandu. He was brought up in Mfui, and he has a deep passion for wildlife at an early age. And he was actually encouraged to pursue his interest by none other than the safari legend, Phil Berry. He has worked his way up from being a transfer driver to a professional guide, and he now manages, one of the camps of the Bush Camp Company. He's worked for several other safari operators in Zambia, and he's worked with Andy at the Bush Camp Company for the past 15 years. So Fanuel, welcome to you, and thank you for joining us today. I would like to ask you at this point a little bit about how your passion for Zambia and introduce us to what you're doing at the Bushcamp Company.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm a very passionate, about Zambia at large, and more South Luanga National Park and the Bushcamp Company. I'm actually doing camp managing and guiding at Chamilando Camp, which is actually under the Bushcamp Company. Now we actually really trying our level best during this time of this pandemic to try and see what better we can do to actually continue with what we've been doing. We're very optimistic that things will actually get better. Now talking about the Bushcamp Company, we actually residing within South Luanga National Park, and it's a park that is well known for for its leopard. It's actually called the Valley of Leopards, and the leopards are actually I would say one of my favorite animals. I actually love leopards a lot, we're lucky, and also South Luangwa is also the national park, which is actually an iconic national park, one of an iconic national parks in Africa, and it's actually the park that is got one of the healthiest population of African wild dogs. So for us, that is actually one of the selling points. And not only that, but then the area that we operate as the Bushcamp Company, we operate in the more remote areas, and we've got small camps that we actually make them more exclusive to our guests.
Thank you, Fanwa. I really appreciate that. That's absolutely wonderful. And then moving on, I want to introduce you to Grant Cummings, who Grant I've known for many, many years. I think it's almost coming up to 20 years now. Grant is the owner of Chiawa and was also born and brought up in Zambia. And he has a vast experience in guiding conservation and the safari industry. The Cummings family pioneered safaris in the lower Zambezi, and they founded Chiawa Camp in 1989. So if anybody's concerned about a camp not living beyond COVID, don't worry about that. They've been through hell and high water over the past 30 years or so, and they're definitely going to be around for a lot longer to come. It was the first camp to open in the lower Zambezi Park. And today, Chiawa is certainly one of the leading safari brands in Africa. It's a very well-known experience and one of the most iconic camps around as well. One of my favorites, though, is the picture that you can see in front of you, which is Old Mondoro. Grant opened up Old Mondoro, was about 15 years ago now, or 12 years ago, Grant, that you opened up in Old Mondoro. And recently, they've opened up Chichili Lodge and Puka Ridge. So, Grant, over to you to give us a little bit of an introduction and to your passion and love for Zambia.
Thanks, Suzanne, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. We opened Old Mondoro in 1997. That's how time flies.
No, no, you didn't. We still had it. It was still potato bush then. Remember, it was later. No.
Was it? Oh, maybe it was 2007. Maybe it was 2007.
2007.
2007. Oh, well,
yes.
You just gave 10 extra years of my life. Thank you. 2007. I'm counting on my fingers there, going like, really? It can't have been that long. I'm not that old. Anyway, at least Old Mondoro isn't. Yeah, I've been fortunate to have been born in Zambia, grown up in Zambia, experienced all of its major wildlife areas. And every time I visit any one of them, that becomes my new favorite national park. But I always end up back in the lower Zambezi for obvious reasons. The lower Zambezi is special and unique to me. I guess it's very similar to Monopools. But Zambia, despite all our marketing efforts for 30 years now, is still relatively unknown. It's still this crazy place which people don't know how to sell, and hopefully we'll be able to address some of that over this chat. And we're going to try and give you some good reasons and some tips on how to sell it. I'm not going to talk about the other parks in Zambia in general, but as far as the Lower Zambezi is concerned, we've got it all. We've got the scene. It packs a big punch for a small national park, let me say. It's got fabulous camps, not just mine. There's other great camps there too. It's earned a very good reputation for the quality of its guiding. By virtue of the river, the guides have to be multi-talented. They have to drive, walk, canoe, fish. And we're all conservationists working closely hand in hand with Conservation Lower Zambezi. A guide may be on a walk, he finds a snare, and he gets the whole thing into action. And our guests, Suzanne, you've been with me darting a lion. Fortunately, poaching is becoming much more rare now. It still happens out in the hills and the remote areas. But again, it's one of the reasons why Zambia should be supported, I think. There's a lot of private-public partnerships in that regard, because the government itself doesn't have the resources to do that thing on its own. So, and I think we'll get into that during the course of this chat. So, you know, without much more ado, let me pass on to someone else.
Thank you, Grant. Thank you. And then I'd like to introduce you to Mark Mcadam. And Mark was born in Cape Town, and he's actually out in the Karoo at the moment. And interestingly, Mark and I share an interesting history, because if it wasn't for Mark's father, I wouldn't be sitting where I am today. I started working for Bill Mcadam when I left, one of my first job after university. Bill was my greatest mentor, really, when I was at a very young age, coming into the tourism industry, when we launched Bushman's Kloof. I was a kid who knew absolutely nothing about tourism. And I think Mark was a few years older than me, didn't know very much more, but he was managing and running Bushman's Kloof with his wife then, Beth. And we launched Bushman's Kloof, and it was a great success. Mark has always had a deep passion for Africa. And during all those years, which was in the this is now mid-1990s, he would come to Indaba, and there would be remote Africa safaris, because John and Carol would be at the trade shows, and Mark and Bill would come along, or Mark would just come along to the trade shows as well. And that's where he met the the Coppingers, and heard more about remote Africa and Zambia. When Mark sold Bushman's Kloof to the Tolman family, he then started another successful game ranch in the Karoo, and he then sold that a few years ago. And after that, he contacted John with looking for opportunities in Zambia. Timing was absolutely perfect. The Coppingers were looking for an equity partner. And in 2019, last year only, very recently, Mark finalized agreement with the Coppingers and has joined the Remote Africa team as a partner. So welcome to you, Mark. We've got lots of exciting new things happening in your part of Zambia, and delighted to have you here today.
Thank you, Suzanne, and thank you for that full and detailed intro into what I've been doing over the last few years of my life. Thank you for allowing me onto the panel. It's great to be talking about Zambia, which has been one of the countries that I have most loved going to. I've been fortunate enough to travel throughout Southern Africa over the last 30 years or so. And to me, Zambia is the last undiscovered gem left in the region. And the reason for it is because it has a relatively small population relative to the size of the country. And it has some very incredibly huge and varied national parks. For me in particular, John and Carol Coppinger, who I met many, many years ago at Indaba at the Classic Retreats table, he kept me enthralled by stories of the Luanga Valley and the Luanga River, and in particular, these vast expanses of wilderness that were left there and what he was doing. So when the opportunity arose, I gave him a call and I said to him, I'm looking to do something as wild as possible in terms of what was left in Africa. And to me, Zambia is the last country left where one can truly say that you're in the wild. The Luanga River in particular, for me, has a great fascination. It's over 1,000 kilometers long. I think there are only 3 bridges that cross it from the source until it enters the Zambezi River. It's as wild as you can get. It's not dammed, it's not irrigated, and the animals have been doing what they're doing for the last however many thousand years. So for me, it was a great opportunity to get involved with John and Carol, who had been there for the last 35 years and are one of the pioneering families in the Luangwa Valley. And I wanted some experienced partners to get in because it was a big leap of faith for me. I've only spent a couple of years there getting to know the place, but the more time I spend there, the more I love it. It's really getting back to one's roots, and it's touching the wild. The camps are small and intimate. They're family owned and operated, and it's all about the wildlife experience. So it doesn't get much wilder than the Kafue, the lower Zambezi, and the Luangwa Valley. We get even wilder when one goes north into North Park, in which we have 2 camps. That's even wilder. It's a very well-managed park. It has fantastic lion and buffalo populations. It's really the only park with a viable breeding population of black rhino. And then we've also ventured into the Benguelu swamps, where one can see black lechwe. I think there are probably 75,000 of them now. It's a combination that we're working on with African parks, and we have a camp there called the Shubal Island Camp. And from 2021, we have a lease agreement with African parks, and it's an 8-bed camp up in the Benguelu swamps. So to me, what makes Zambia completely unique and special, you're dealing with 3 of the great river systems of Southern Africa. You've got the Kafue River, the Zambezi River, and the Luangwa River. That alone makes it special. The birding is incredible, the trees are beautiful, and the wildlife is real. So that's what I like. It's small, intimate camps in big, wild areas.
Absolutely, it's the most extraordinary destination, and also landlocked by 8 different countries around it as well. So Zambia is, quite a unique positioning within the African landscape. Thank you very much, Mark. And then I'd like to move on to Tyrone. So Tyrone was born and raised, he's the only one on this whole panel, even in me, I'm born and raised in Africa. He was born and raised in England. So the English boy who had lots of wonderful childhood adventures that took him up to the Kafue, I'm very, very fortunate child. So growing up with this exposure, he decided to use this for his passion and go, create a career out of going forward. So he studied conservation ecology from Durrell Institute of Conservation and Ecology at the University of Kent. And he graduated on a Wednesday and was out of the UK by Friday and back into Africa. And he has guided and worked across many African countries, including Zukuma, the Central African Republic, and a little while actually, when I was up with Rod Cassidy at Sangha Lodge, Rod was talking about Tyrone, which was very interesting, which was just a few months ago in March. So he's been there, and then I spent a lot of time in Busanga Plains before he joined Phil Jeffrey, and they hatched the idea of creating Jeffrey McKeith Safaris, which was started in 2012. They now have 2 camps in the Kafue area, and Tyrone, I'd like to hand over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. So I think you've summarized it pretty well there. We've got 2 small properties in the northern part of the Kafue. For those of you who do or do not know much about the Kafue, it's massive. And so, we are in the northern part of it, but there's a lot of bush even in the northern sector. We started in 2012, initially sort of with mobile safaris and exploring very, very remote sectors of that area in the north. We've been operating for, what's that now, 8 years. 2 camps. Musekesi camp is our sort of base camp. And then for a short few months, we also operate a smaller bush camp on the Busanga Plains. So that's what we do up there. Aside to that, we've been utilizing our sort of background and interest in conservation for the last few years and we started a non-profit organization called Musekesi Conservation, which helps support anti-poaching efforts in the northeastern part of the Kafue, which alone is about 2,500 square kilometers, just the area around our Musekesi camp, and we are one of only 2 properties in 2,500 square kilometers. So yeah, Mark was talking about how you know, how wild and true the wilderness is in Zambia. And of course I'm biased, but I think the Kafue is the epitome of wilderness in Zambia, along with, I would probably suggest, the North Luanga as well. So so as a side to what we do in the Kafue National Park, we also do run some mobile safaris out in the Lua Plains. And that was born out of our support for some of the wildlife documentary filmmakers for the last sort of 6, 7, 8 years. And so we really just got to know that Lua Plains area, and that sort of coerced us into doing a few mobiles there the last few years. So yeah, that's what we do. And yeah, I look forward to giving a bit more information on that today. Thanks.
Fantastic, thank you. So I'm just going to go into a panel discussion over here, and I'm going to open up the chat side as well, so I can see what, please, if anybody has any questions or anything like that that they'd like to pose, please do just post your chats on the side. We'd be delighted to hear from you on the side. And my team, as always, are also going to be reading those, and will be sending us any messages, but just keep posting on that side if there's anything in particular you'd like to be asking us. So what I'd really like to now start looking at is Destination Zambia, and why, quite interestingly, and actually I'm just going to ask this question to Grant, who's been around for the longest in this area. Why do you think within Zambia we have no big corporate companies? It is generally smaller individual companies that are made up with a huge amount of passion. And we know some of the bigger guys have come in and backed out really fast. But the bigger guys, the bigger corporate companies and entities, you know, the Ambions and the Wildernesses and all of those have stuck to Botswana, and they're moving a little bit into the Zimbabwe side. But Zambia is primarily made up of individual smaller businesses with a deep passion for the area. So I'd like to know why you think that why we've got these individual companies over here rather than the bigger corporates. Grant?
I can only speculate, but I think we'll start with the obvious. I think the big corporates were late to get into the game in Zambia. The best locations were taken up already in the South Luanga and the Lower Zambezi, certainly. So when you come in late and you get maybe a second tier location, that might be harder to sell. The other thing is, I think big corporates require stability. Zambia is anything but. It requires experience, it requires connections. And if you don't have all of that, it makes it very difficult to operate as a corporate. I think the small owner-operated businesses are flexible, adaptable, connected, and have learned how to operate in Zambia. And I think also it's not a highly profitable destination for a business to work in. So if you've got maybe a top-heavy structure in another country that requires support financially from Zambia, I think that's difficult. So I think Zambia is suited for the leaner type operations. That's just an opinion.
Which actually makes the experiences there so much more unique and authentic, because what you've created are leaner camp styles, which are much more connected to the environment, which I think is what one of the key factors is about a destination like Zambia. So I completely agree with you on that. What we're going to do now is actually go into the different destinations. And Grant, I'm just going to start in the south. So we're going to do the Lower Zambezi as the first destination. But one of the questions that has come up over here as well is from Micah Torkelson is, what is the current situation about the horrible mining plans in the Lower Zambezi? So if you can give us a bit details on the Lower Zambezi as well as give us an answer to that question, it would be great. Thank you, Grant.
It's the sort of thing which keeps the corporates out, right? The threat of a mine. And we don't know what the future is. We don't think it'll go ahead. The government has said it won't. But things change. We do. I think the most important thing we can do is to support the Lower Zambezi, the South Luanga, the Kafue, so that the local people and the governments understand the value of these places as tourism and wildlife destinations, as opposed to an alternative land use. So why should the Lower Zambezi be a national park instead of a copper mine? Well, I can tell you, well, that's not a picture of the Lower Zambezi up there, but we've got that river and the unique floodplain system. Anyone who's been into the Lower Zambezi and Mana pools, if you see a photograph of an elephant in the trees there, or even a baboon in the trees there, it can only be one place in the world. You can't mistake it with anywhere else. It's visually and ecologically quite unique. And although it's not a huge area, we don't have, like the Kafue, which is 22,000 plus kilometers, we've only got 4,000 square kilometers, of which we only utilize really about 300 square kilometers tops. We've got this density of wildlife, elephant, the big cats, minus cheetah, of course, dogs and the river, and this combination of activities. So you've got this wildlife and really lush beauty, which makes the Lower Zambezi very attractive from a tourism perspective. It's not difficult to get to from Lusaka. It's also got, it's a 30-minute flight from Lusaka, which is very easy. And of course, ProFlight introduced a couple of years ago these non-stop flights from Lower Zambezi, between Lower Zambezi and Mfui, South Luangwa, and Lower Zambezi and Livingston, which also made it that much better connected. So it's connected, it's beautiful, it's got great wildlife, great scenery, fabulous camps, and great guiding. So what more do you need? And then it complements perfectly with any of the South Luangwa, the Kafue, Lua, if you catch the right season, and similarly for Bangwelu, which you mentioned.
And Grant, just on that, I mean, having traveled a lot around Africa, one of the things that I think is extraordinary, and there's nothing else like this, just in terms of having the escarpment, and the distance between the escarpment and the river creates this natural sort of envelope, essentially, and the way that the mountains are shaped with the river, there's all these natural boundaries that create a very, very intense wildlife destination. And you've got the lower floodplains, and then that bit of a ridge, and then you've got the higher floodplains as well. So you've got these different ecosystems that are creating the most game-rich and intense destination. And what I personally love about it is walking in those winter thorn forests, especially around Old Mondoro, is absolutely magnificent. You've got the perfect conditions. If any of you have done a lot of walking safaris, the worst thing to do is walk in too much heat. In that area, you can walk for hours with this beautiful canopy of shade under the winter thorns. And then because of the vegetation as well, it's been naturally gray, so you can see everything as well. It's one of the most extraordinary areas for a walk. And then combined with that, of course, is the canoeing safaris as well, which make it a very unique experience. So being able to canoe in the morning and walk in the afternoons, or vice versa, is a wonderful, wonderful experience on that side. Where your guests, what are they combining with? Are they combining predominantly with other destinations in Zambia? Because I've been there quite a few times where people have been either going up to the Luanga, or they've been actually going on to Zimbabwe and Botswana as well. What do you think the percentages of combinations going on?
The majority of our UK and European, Australian guests are on a Zambia itinerary. And of course, the majority of that lot will be doing the South Luangwa. Our American guests, they tend to do multi-country itineraries, and we find them combining the Lower Zambezi with Bots, the Kruger, and Cape Town. You know, they take a private plane all the way up through, and maybe even finish in the crater. They do some crazy expensive itineraries like that. So we welcome them all. We don't mind how it's combined. Just bring them into the Lower Zambezi on their way through.
Anywhere into Zambia.
Well, of course.
Great. Okay, thank you, Grant. And then Funwell, we're going to move on to you now. You're going to give us a bit about the South Luangwa and your interpretation of what business is like in that area. And then Grant, if you could also just pop in, because I know you've got camps there as well. But Funwell, you're selling the South Luangwa. What makes it so unique and special?
Wow, thank you. Yeah, no, first and foremost, South Luangwa, what makes South Luangwa special is, you know, the abundance in wildlife. And as I said, you know, the high population of leopards we've got, that is actually one of our selling points. And not only that, but you know, the healthiest population of wild dogs, which is not in many other African countries at the moment, as it is a species that has, you know, its population actually gotten depleted in most other African countries. So we are lucky that we still have got a very healthy population of African wild dogs or painted dogs. And not only that, but you know, we've got you know, more exclusive camps that are found in more pristine, remote sort of areas, which is actually, you know, an experience that not many, you know, parts of Africa are actually, you know, offering at the moment, as many other places have been more sort of commercialized. But we've actually kept, you know, our places as more pristine, as more, you know, exclusive and more remote. So that gives, you know, a completely different sort of experience to our guests. Not only that, but when we actually looking at the quality of the guides, we've got very high qualitable guides that have undergone very, you know, very intense sort of training to try and better up the standard of guiding. And that for us is another point of sale for our national park. Yeah, now we also have got endemic species of wildlife. For instance, the thorncroft giraffes and the Cook's wildebeest, which you are not going to find anywhere else, but you know, you have to come to South Luangwa to find that. So, you know, that makes our parks very special. Yeah, I think I would end there at the moment.
Fantastic. Just on that note, I've just got a question that has come in from Tammy Chaplin, which I'd like you to answer, which is how are wildlife sightings managed in the South Luangwa, and it was actually asked of the Lower Zambezi as well, with the variety and number of operators in the area? I presume guides try to manage, but does it actually happen that guests get a reasonable amount of exclusivity? I think that's actually quite an interesting question. And I have to say, it's once, if you've been to Zambia and you've known these destinations, you know how fortunate you are in the sightings. But Fanwa, in terms of the Bushcamp company, do you want to give us an idea of how the sightings are managed versus what's happening at Mfuwi Lodge? And then Grant, if you can give us an idea of what's happening in the Lower Zambezi as well. So are you sharing sightings with other vehicles that are not part of our own lodges?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, you know, we've got Mfuwi Lodge as the main sort of hub, and then we've got 6 bush camps, which are actually in the southernmost part of the park, where we've been actually lucky at the moment that no any other tour or safari operators have actually gotten into that part of the park. So basically, we are actually the only ones operating in that area. So between and amongst ourselves, we are able to manage it properly. If there is any sighting, we coordinate, you know, through the radios to try and make sure that we do not congest that particular sighting. And then we're gonna give ourselves time. Okay, you know, you get here, you know, in the next 30 minutes, I'll be out of the sighting, so that you can actually, you know, have your more private kind of, you know, sighting. So by doing that, we've actually kind of easily and possibly managed the sightings, you know, within our areas of operations, particularly in the down in the bush.
I would just say my experience. Yeah, my experience across all of Zambia, which is one of the things I absolutely love, is I have to be honest that I'm not that keen on people. I would go anywhere in the world as long as I don't have to see other tourists. That's my sort of approach on things. So I'm the sort of person that will travel to countries that have got government restrictions, because as long as there are no other tourists there. What I love about Zambia is that you can go on a safari and you don't see other people. These are the most pristine areas. The chances of bumping into somebody along the way is relatively slim at all of the camps that we're discussing today. So, which I think is a wonderful, wonderful part of that experience. And then, Fanwell, can you just talk a little bit more about the walking opportunities in the South Luanga as well, and what clients might see on a walking safari?
Thank you. Yeah, so as you know, Zambia at large is actually, more particularly South Luangwa, is the birthplace for walking safaris, the whole Africa. This is where walking safaris got initiated before it got spread out across the continent. So it is such a great experience. You get to actually see more than just bigger game. On walking safaris, you get to actually get the full experience of the typical African bush, where you get to actually talk about, the tracks and signs. You get to talk about, the scatology, which is something that normally people wouldn't actually talk about. You get to talk more in details about, insects. You get to talk about the vegetation, the medicinal uses of different plants. You get to talk about, survival techniques whilst you are actually in the bush, which is some of, of the senses that we people have actually lost in the long run, particularly in the Western world, where we don't get to actually, walk barefooted, walk through rough, rugged terrain where animals have actually walked through. You get people down on their feet, getting down to try and investigate what has actually happened, an hour ago, where the lions walked through, where the leopard walked through, how long ago did the leopard walk through there? Is that leopard a female? Is that leopard a male? All those kind of, details that you cannot experience whilst you are actually on the jeep, you get to experience it on the walking safaris. And then the smell, you get to use your sense of smell. You get different aromatic sort of plants. And some of those aromatic kind of plants will have a story. They have been used in the past by the local people, by the indigenous people. How did they use it? So there's lots that you can learn by getting down on your foot during those walking safari excursions.
So Well, I was walking this past weekend actually, and there were some hyena tracks on the ground. And I actually had a giggle because I remember so clearly doing a walking safari with you, and you imitated how a hyena walks. And that was telling me how you saw the tracks. And I've never ever forgotten it. And every time I go walking anywhere now and I see a hyena track, I think of you and that walking safari that we did many years ago. So I totally agree, and it's a wonderful way to get out and do fantastic experiences. One of the questions that we've just come through as well, and I'd happily hand this over to anybody just to talk about before we move on to Mark, is going to take us up into the North Luangwa, but is to talk about the community activities and knowing that knowing how our agents are going to be encouraging clients to stay longer in destinations. What community activities and conservation-minded experiences that people can get actively involved in are available on that side? So I don't know whether I could actually, maybe Mark, even I can hand that over to you in terms of what is happening already at Tafika. And then Grant, I'd like to bounce it back to you. And I know Tyrone from your side, on the conservation side, there'll be quite a bit. But I think just to talk about what's happening from a community point of view would be a good way to start with remote Africa. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, sure, Suzanne, thank you. We have a thing called the Tafika Trust. And what we do is we support the Mwanya GMA, the communities there, the Mukasanga village in particular. Most of the staff are actually employed from that particular village. And we encourage our clients and our guests to go out and spend a day with the community. Most of the local guides that work there can take them in. You'll meet the families of the guides and the staff that work in the camps, and you'll get an idea. There's a clinic there, there's a school there, there are football teams that we support, and we actively encourage all of our guests to spend a day there and get to know the wonderful community that is all around us. I mean, it's a very important part to be amongst the community on the one hand, and then in the deepest and wildest parts of Africa on the other. And it's a lovely juxtaposition to have the best of both of those worlds and learn a little bit more about the communities that live in these faraway places. So the community is a big part of everything that we do, both in South and North Luangwa. And without the communities there, we wouldn't be able to operate in those particular areas. You know, their stories, their experiences, and how they survive in these areas year to year is fascinating for people to listen to. And it's a very isolated place, particularly the Luangwa Valley. It was very inaccessible for many years. There are a lot of tsetse flies there. There are a lot of dangerous animals there. It was not conducive to any kind of farming activities in the past. So there were small isolated groups of people that actually moved into the valley and made a life down there. And it's a very hard life, and they've adapted extremely well to it. So very big part of what we do there.
Well, I think one of the key things as well with Tafika especially is that unlike everything else that we're talking about over here in terms of camps, you're all, I mean, Chiao, Almondoro, Mfui Lodge and the Bush Camp Company and Tyrone's camps in the Kafui area are all in the national parks. Tafika, out of all of these, and Tequila are the only two camps actually that are based outside of the national park and are based in community land. So they're community partnerships on that side. And one of the key things about Tafika especially is that you do a game drive and you do afternoon activities which are completely inclusive of a community experience as well.
That's right. And particularly with this new project up in the Benguelu swamps. I mean, the Benguelu swamps is not a national park. It's a protected area that's being managed by African parks. It's 600,000 hectares. And there are 50 to 60,000 people that live within the park, fishing for a livelihood. So it's an all-inclusive safari. It's not just about going there to see black lechery and the shoeball stork, but it's about actually getting to know how these communities live and operate and survive in this wilderness of water. And it's fascinating, the fish traps and how they move from these little islands and how they build the fish traps and dry the fish. That's all part of the safari, particularly up in the Benguelu. And more people are wanting that all-inclusive experience. It's not just about seeing the animals and ticking off the big five. It's about actually getting into these remote areas and engaging with people that live in these particular areas. So yeah, it's very important, and I think it's something that more and more people are going to want to do into the future.
Great, fantastic. So, Mark, I want you to now move on to talking about the North Luangwa, and again, just going back into Benguelu swamps. And we actually have quite a few questions coming in from the swamp side. Jim Holden, Jim is a very supportive panel attendee generally. Thank you, Jim, for all your questions as always. Asking what walking is done up in the Benguelu area, and how often or what is the likelihood of seeing a shoeball? Just saying that I have walked that place flat. I did an 8-hour walk through the mud and enjoyed the views and sights. No shoeball to be found for me on that particular day that I flew in. But let's discuss what are you going to be seeing up in the Benguelu swamps, and then just to go back into what's happening on the North Luangwa side as well.
Okay, well, to start up in the north in the Benguelu, what African parks have been doing there over the last couple of years is just fantastic. They introduced 200 buffalo in 2019 back into the swamps. There's talk of them introducing cheetah back into the swamps. But the real reason to go up to the Benguelu is that it is one of the most important wetland areas left in the world. The birding is just off the charts. It's absolutely some of the best waders and water birds you'll ever find. And obviously the ultimate tick is the shoeball stork. African parks have specialist people up there that are monitoring the shoeball nests, and it is on a 3-day safari to the Benguelu. there is a reasonable chance. This is new to us, new to Remote Africa Safari, so I can't speak from experience. But all I do know is that the guys up there are experts in what they do, and they monitor the breeding sites and the nests of the shoe bulls. So you will canoe for some of it, you may drive for a short section, and then you'll actually walk through the swamps to get to see the shoe bull on the nests. So it's an incredibly immersive, exciting experience. And along the way, you're going to be bumping herds of up to 10,000 black lechwe. It's the only area in Africa where the black lechwe occur. It's an endemic species to that particular area. So you'll see them by the thousands. In addition, there are tsesebe, there are oribi. So these are animals that you don't normally see in the Luangwa Valley. So it's a different type of experience completely to coming out of the valley up on the escarpment. It's drained by 3 major rivers, which eventually make their way into the Congo River. And it's a lovely add-on to a big game safari, to do something different. I've only been up there once myself, but all I can say is African Parks are doing a fantastic job, and we're really excited to be getting involved with them and operating Shoe Bull Island from next year. And operating out of there. We have a small charter business.
Fantastic.
I was just going to say, in terms of, excuse me, in terms of access in, there's an airstrip right there, and it's a 40-minute flight from either South or North Luangwa.
So it's very, so Mark, just on that side, I think we've gone through a little bit on the Bingwelu side, and we're just as a recap there, you are going into partnership with African Parks and taking over Shoe Bull Island Lodge, which is very exciting. And then with the RAS Air, you'll be able to do combinations between South Luangwa, North Luangwa, and the Bingwelu Swamp. So there's this perfect triangle that is taking place up in this area. But since you're the only one of the camp up in the North Luangwa, can you also just give us a little bit of background as to what's going on up here? This is 4,500 square kilometers of pristine wilderness.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it doesn't get much wilder than North Luangwa. I'm sure Tyrone may have a bit to say about that in terms of the Kafui. North Luangwa is very special because it's one of the best managed parks in Zambia. It's run by the Frankfurt Zoological Society and funded by them. Ed Sayer is doing an incredible job there with his team in terms of anti-poaching. And it truly is one of the last wild places left in Africa. It has a major river that bisects the park from the escarpment and flows into the Luangwa called the Moleshi River. We have a camp on the Moleshi, and we do walking safaris from that camp along the floodplains of the Moleshi River. So that particular river system is a shallow, sandy river. You can swim in it, not that it's very deep, maybe a foot or 2 deep. But it essentially acts as a magnet to all the animals in that park as it dries out. There are no artificial waters there. Obviously, it's all spring-fed or river-fed. So you get incredible sightings of buffalo herds of up to 1,000 strong. The lions follow. And obviously the most important part of that is that there's a black rhino reintroduction that has happened there over the last 10 or 15 years. They're doing really well under Ed Sayer's custodianship. And it is just one of the only parks, I think, and I stand to be corrected, Grant, but that can offer the Big Five, the potential of seeing the Big Five in Zambia. So we're very excited about that. We've had 1 or 2 sightings there last season, both on foot and from a vehicle. And I think the most important thing about it is we are the only real operators in that area. So you essentially have the park to yourself. Takwela, which is our new operation, John Coppinger took him 14 years to negotiate that 99-year lease agreement. It's on the confluence of the Moleshi and the Luangwa River. So it has a very beautiful setting, and it's a brand new camp. And we're going to be able to offer driving from that, because at the moment, Moleshi is really walking only. So we're trying to offer the best of both worlds. It's a very short duration season up there because of the black cotton soils, the inaccessibility of getting in there with all the rivers that drain from the escarpments. So we only have a 4.5-month season. So for the people that actually plan to get there, it's a very complete and immersive experience into one of the last great wild areas of Africa. And you have it pretty much all to yourself.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mark. I just want to just one of the questions that has come through, which, and in my understanding, was asking about the shoe bills. Jim, to that question, as far as I understand, the shoe bills are better seen at in the beginning part of the season. So in June, July, August sort of time, when the water is still quite high. When the water starts receding, you have to walk much deeper into the swamp to find the shoe bills. So the peak season for seeing the shoe bills is towards the beginning of the season, which is going to be after the rains in June, July, and August on that side of it. Okay, and then in terms of the seasonality, the North Luangwa has a slightly shorter season than the other camps, because they need to get in there to start building those camps. But the camps, well, those camps generally open up around July, and they run to October. Great. So I'm going to now move on to Tyrone, which is going to be very exciting, because even I don't know much about this area, and we're going to learn a bit more about the Kafui and the Lua together on your side. So Tyrone, over to you as to why somebody should be visiting this western part of Zambia.
Thanks, Suzanne. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough to put the whole Kafui into context because it is so big. But I suppose the main sort of USP would be everything that has been said so far, but to the nth degree. So wilderness, the quality of the wildlife experience, the expansiveness of the park. It's huge with so few operators. I think over the years, people may have thought that one of the reasons that it was less known is maybe because there was less to see. But I think folk that have been the last 5 or 10 years have come to realize that it isn't the case at all. And there's some wonderful wildlife. And arguably some of the areas in the Kafue National Park can rival some of our better known and more visited areas of Zambia. I think it speaks volumes that the likes of African parks, which of course do very well with their management of Bangweulu, as Mark says, and the Lua Plains National Park, have such a vested interest in the Kafue too. I think, they're no mugs. So it shows you that there's something very special in the park. Even for myself as a kid going there, it's a very different park today than it was, 20, 30 years ago. And for the better, and as I say, the last 5, 10 years has seen an expansion in visitation. But because of its size, it's a saving grace. Whilst we're getting more and more visitors year on year, it doesn't detract at all from the guest experience. For example, the camps that we operate at Musikesi are, my sort of main camp. We have never, we don't see anyone else on activities because there isn't anyone else. So it's not that you might not bump into someone else, or it might only be another couple of vehicles at a nice wild dog sighting. There's no one else. So it's a wonderful experience, and everything that Zambia is about is exactly what the Kafue has still to offer. The Busanga Plains is a better known area of the Kafue National Park in the northwest, and there are a few there's a cluster of camps up in that area. There's about I would say probably 4 or 5 camps up in the area. And when you look at a map, you think, oh, that's quite a cluster of camps. But the Busanga Plains is 720 square kilometers itself. So again, you can still safari on the Busanga Plains and not really see anyone else. And that's the busiest place in the Kafue. But I'm always at pains when I do talk about the Kafue to explain to folk that there's far more to the park than just the Busanga Plains. There are some wonderful, beautiful areas with some very, very good game. But of course, it's huge. So there are some areas which is a little quieter than other areas, but there is, if you drive out of the valley floor and the lower Zambezi into the Escarpment, you don't see as much. But everywhere has its charm, and there's a lot to be seen. A lot of the big and glamorous species are still there in great number. Very good population of wild dog. Lion, of course, well represented. Leopard. But not just the big stuff. It's a home to a lot of the rarer and rare to see animals. So the sable and roan. It's got the highest bird list of any national park in Zambia, up to 502 now. We actually added the last couple, the last few years. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about the Kafue, but it's a vast area with a lot going on. Access-wise, as you can see, it's not all that far from Lusaka. So some of the more centrally located lodges in the park are accessible by road. It's only about 3.5 hour drive, but there are airstrips dotted throughout the entirety of the park. We don't have ProFlight flying in and out, but we do have seat rates with another operator called SkyTrails, and the flight's an hour long. And actually having a more flexible schedule on a seat rate is arguably even easier than having a fixed time that you have to slot into. So we've been lucky that's been running for 2 years now, and it's made life a lot easier, because another downside of selling the Kafui over the years was how do you tie it into another itinerary? And the Kafui is definitely not an add-on anymore to an itinerary in Zambia. It's very much a destination in its own right, and that's what we're seeing a lot more people deciding, right, this year I'm doing the Kafui. Last year I went to somewhere else, but yeah. Sorry, Suzanne, go on. Yep.
So talking about the Kafui being a destination, explain what a 5 or 7 day safari would look like.
Well, a 5 or 7 day safari, I would suggest only visiting 2 camps maximum in that time. And you just have to decide, you know, based on your guest interests, which area to go to. Yeah, you could genuinely, honestly, hand on heart, do a 2-week trip through the Kafui from south to north. It's so varied. The Busanga Plains is as different to the Musakesi camp area, which is 3.5-4 hours drive away, as it is to the Luanga. It's completely different. It's got vast granite rocks, open floodplains, riparian woodlands, mountains. It's got everything. So it's so hard to piece together what the Kafui is in one sort of statement. But if you have a shorter time frame, then yeah, you know, if you're interested in walking, for example, choose your camps accordingly. There's only a few camps that like to walk. If you want to see as much big game as you can, maybe the Busanga Plains is the place for you. If you want to go canoeing on the rapids, then stay at Kaingu, you know. So there's a lot of lovely parts of it, but you really need local knowledge to know where to go and to maximize your time there. Yeah.
Thank you. So guys, we've gone through the different destinations. So what I'd like to have a look at now is an advice on how we would start piecing this together to create the ideal safari. The questions that I've been noticing coming through from the panelists have been around, we've got some questions around COVID protocols. We should maybe want to touch on those. Maybe Grant, since you are in operational, and Fanwell, since you're right there, you can touch on some of the COVID policies. But what I'd really like to explore a little bit further, and while we've been in the last half an hour of today's chat, is how would we take these destinations now and create the perfect safari? This is not doable in one safari at all, unless you want to spend 2 months up in Zambia. So in each area, you are looking at, I would consider at least, I mean, the lower Zambezi, I think, is best on 5 to 7 nights. The South Luanga is at least a 7 to 10 night destination. North Luanga is 5 nights. Bangwelu Swamps is 4 to 5 nights. Kafui is already a week, plus adding in Lure you into 2 weeks here. So I think we've really got a few segments of itineraries. And the other question that has come through from Joe Charleston, which is a really good one as well, was when you do walking, do you recommend staying in one camp for several nights or walking from one camp to another and spending a night or 2 at each? What would be the average length of walking in terms of number of nights, and presumably luggage can move between these as well, easily by road. So nice to go a little bit more into what happens in terms of that immersive walking experience. But if we were trying to create an itinerary, I'd like to start with you, Grant, in terms of what would be your ideal itinerary. We're each going to go through each of you. What would be your ideal itinerary for Zambia? And by the way, I'm going to be taking notes of this, and we'll be sharing this with every single person that is listening today, as well as all the analysts, all the attendees that are not able to join us, who generally subscribe, and we send them the notes afterwards. We'll be taking this down and creating wonderful itineraries for our listeners. Grant, over to you.
Yeah, no pressure. So, you know, there was an itinerary which might have been ideal last year, and then an itinerary, let's just talk about 2021, shall we, which might be quite different. You know, there's been talk about longer stays, more immersive visits, less skimming, and staying in one location. So just going back to Tyrone's thing, the Kafui, if you wanted to do the north, the middle, and the south. That's a trip to Zambia on its own.
Yep.
The lower Zambezi, less so. I think a week maximum, and you've done it as well as possible. South Luangwa National Park, same. A week, maybe 9 days if you really spread it out, and going on into the North Luangwa. So it all comes down to a function of time, interest, and money. Right, that was the long answer. Short answer, if you wanted my perfect itinerary, I'd go and start with Phil and Tyrone in the Kafui at Musikesi. I would take in either their mobile trip onto the plains, or maybe, sorry, what's the name of your halfway house between Musikesi and the plains, Tyrone?
In Temwa.
Temwa. Yeah, or maybe do Musikesi and base yourself out of Ntemwa and go and check the north part around the Basanga. That's probably as good a Kafui experience as you're going to get. Lower Zambezi, I'll be biased, and do a 5 or 7 night Jawa camp and Old Mondoro combo. It's high end, but you won't get better value or a more comprehensive look at the Lower Zambezi than that, with the guiding to boot. South Luangwa, a little bit biased. I would start at Puku Ridge, get in some of that wow factor luxury, and then go down into Andes camps into the south, and depending on time, interest, and money, go up into the north, do remote, go and see Tequila in the North Luangwa, try and spot a black rhino. And I would definitely go up to the Basanga, those herds of black lechwe, the Sesame, the Orobi, a Silatunga or two, and of course the shoebill. How much time, interest, and money have your clients got?
Well, if we have to rewind it, actually, because one of the panelists has come through, Gretchen has said over here, most Americans, as we know, have 10 nights. So let's do, Fanuel, what would you say for a 10-night safari in Zambia? And it's not allowed to just be the Bush Camp Company. What would your 10-night be?
Oh, thank you. For me, I would actually suggest and advise to try and do a combination. Of course, for us, from our side, we've got several bush camps that we also do camp to camp walking transfers. Our guests would actually spend maybe a couple of nights or 3 nights or 4 nights at one camp, and then on their last day move on foot to another camp while the luggage are being taken on the jeep. And then they could do that for 3 camps that are actually in a row, possibly. Maybe once they do that, then they could actually combine with any camp in the northern part, in North Luangwa National Park. For instance, Tafika, they would actually do Tafika, or they do North Luangwa, it's actually very easy, because down in our camps, in the bush camps, we've got an airstrip. And then up in the northern part, or up in North Luangwa, they've got an airstrip. So, that is actually doable so easily, because they could just easily fly in and out. So that gives more flexibility, and of course, different experience, different vegetation, different habitat, different wildlife, in one package.
Thank you. I would just like to say, I think my experience in Zambia and understanding where the trade is coming from, I do not feel that Zambia is a country that you can do in one. It's not like some other destinations, where you think you've been there, done that. There are 3 very distinct itineraries that I would consider in Zambia personally. I would say as a really good starting introduction and encapsulating Zambia for the essence of it, I would do the Lower Zambezi and the South Luanga. I think that's those two areas as a starting combination are really strong. Then the second option, I would look at rather immersing myself into certain destinations. The next would be to do a little bit of the South Luangwa and then do the North Luangwa and Benguelu swamps. If you're really keen on walking, personally, I haven't walked in Kafue, so I can't really comment on that, but the walking up in the North Luangwa is absolutely exceptional. So then to combine just a dip into the south and then to really spend time up in the North Luangwa, I personally consider that 1 week in just that destination and then going on to Benguelu. That's a second sort of itinerary over there. Then Kafue and Lua and Busanga Plains and all those areas, that's a whole itinerary in itself. So I personally feel that we've got three really distinct itineraries and circuits to be doing here, each of them 10 to 12 days. Even that is a bit on the shy side, but I think that those would make a fantastic option on how best to be experiencing Zambia. What we will do for everybody as well, just so you all know, is we'll create these itineraries and share them with you with an outline of the costings as well and the access routes that makes it that much easier for you to be selling these going forward. So just another question I'd like to ask now is, why do you think agents should be supporting more of Zambia? So Mark, maybe from your side, why do you think Zambia needs more support than other destinations? What is the reason we should be doing, giving it more of a punt in terms of conservation communities and as a destination?
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. I think very simply is that everyone's looking to do something different and expose their client base to different experiences. And I think Zambia has that. I mean, to come back to your question about itineraries, as much as we'd all like to fill our own bed nights, just the three or four panelists on this particular talk, you've got three great rivers. You've got the Kafue, you've got the Zambezi, and you've got the Luangwa. I mean, to do 10 days and three great rivers in Africa, that's a great way to start. And then what will happen is people decide, you know what, I need more time in Kafue, I want to spend more time in Lower Zambezi, or I want to see more of North Luangwa or South Luangwa. Each of them are exceptional in their own right. To have it in one country with an access point from Lusaka with easy flying is the way to go. You know, as far as we're concerned, we are remote Africa safaris, so we operate in very remote areas. And you need to be able to fly around. And we have these destinations on tap because we have these airstrips throughout. The Benguelu swamps is a very remote, unknown part of the world. But I think it's a natural add-on to most safaris because it is just so different from everything else. But if you had to ask me, I just think you can offer unique and different safari experiences in a very short space of time. And rivers are the arteries of life. I mean, water is everything. So to be on the Kafue River, the Zambezi River, and the Luangwa River, they're all different, but they're all completely unique. So for me, it's like a multitude of safari destinations in one country. I also think that the people that are working in these camps are some of the friendliest and most down-to-earth and just simply the nicest people to be around. So, you know, I'm a South African, but to me, Zambia was the choice of where I wanted to invest because I think it has so much to offer, and I think it has so much potential going forward.
Great. Okay, then one question. Thank you for that, Mark. Which question that has come through here is, in light of what is happening with COVID, how does Zambia do in terms of conservation? It has been said that Africa safaris cannot depend on tourism to fund all conservation, as tourism is stopped. How does Zambia get funding to support wildlife if it's not from tourism? Tyrone, since you were doing some extraordinary work out in the Kafue, would you like to answer that question? How are you managing your conservation work without tourism income?
Yeah, it's a good question, Suzanne. You know, it's been a fascinating journey for our NGO, Musakesi Conservation, that we started in the Kafue. You know, we funded the creation of our project. 70% of the money that went to starting the project and training the scouts, equipping the scouts, buying vehicles, everything that goes in with that, 70% of that came from the revenues of our safari company, Jeffrey McKee Safaris. And I'll be the first to put my hand up, and, you know, well, none of us saw what we are in now coming, I suppose. But what it did highlight to us is that whilst we were more than happy to put our money where our mouth was from the tourism paying for conservation, and in our example, it's a very, very tangible link to tourism and conservation. We've come to this point this year where there's zero income for tourism. And with our conservation project relying on tourism, because we're putting those profits, those revenues back into it, we've had to adjust. And so we've gone from what everyone perceived as a very sustainable way of approaching conservation by having it supported by tourism, having to look for alternative ways to maintain the conservation effort that we're putting into the northeastern part of the park. And that's not an insurmountable task. It just means that we're looking more into grant-based funding and more atypical funding mechanisms for conservation. So, you know, looking for large grants from larger NGOs and things like that. So I think what we've learned in a very short period of time is that for any conservation project to work in Zambia, we mustn't be over-reliant on one or the other. And that's what we aim to do in the future with our conservation work in the Kafue, is have a very solid backbone in tourism, because tourism has to support conservation because they're all one and the same thing. And if we're anything worth our salt, then yeah, we need to be putting our money where our mouth is in terms of tourism. But it needs to be supported and not be overly reliant, because we have years like this, and hopefully it won't happen again, but it may well again, where, you know, we're not getting those revenues to support conservation. And that's where we are more specifically with our context here.
And sorry, and Fanwell, can I ask you as well? Thank you for that, Tyrone. But Fanwell, just in terms of what's happening at the Bushcamp Company and all the work that you're doing in the community areas over there, how has your funding worked this year in terms of lack of tourism, with absolutely no tourism for this year?
Thank you. I mean, of course, this pandemic has actually, you know, devastated, you know, everyone, all the countries in the world. However, you know, from the little that we've managed to actually, you know, save from, you know, from the past, we've actually, however, continued, you know, giving, you know, our support to conservation through CSL, which is Conservation South Luanga, which is being headed by Rachel McRobb. And not only that, but we've actually, again, you know, continued, you know, giving a bit of support to ZCP, which is Zambia Carnival Program. Yeah, you know, limping in a more limping way, but, you know, slowly we can actually offer what we can at the moment, as everyone is actually struggling. But yeah, we're just hoping that things will actually get better so that we can carry on with, you know, the support that we've been actually giving. And not only that, but we've actually carried on also in the community. We've got community programs and projects that were actually embarked on, spearheaded by our managing director, Andy Hogg. You know, now we've been doing that for a good number of years, and yeah, now which includes, you know, the drilling of borehole to promote, you know, clean water. So it is actually called the Commit to Clean Water project. We've actually drilled at least about 125 boreholes in different villages, you know, in the surrounding areas. And not only that, but we've actually carried on with our, you know, school projects, which we are actually offering sponsorship to school-going, you know, kids whose parents cannot afford taking their kids to school. And we've actually taken...
And that's all continued throughout this whole COVID time as well, which is absolutely fantastic. So I think it's a really, you know, to be applauded. Very well. So guys, we're just going to be coming. The last thing I need to just, two things I wanted to do is, Grant, I'd like you to just give us an update because people are asking about it. What is happening? I know I hate the question, but we have to answer it. What is happening in terms of COVID protocols on property? How is Zambia as a destination managing COVID for future travelers, airports, access? You've just flown back in from the UK. So can you just give us those things, because everybody needs these questions, always get asked. So it's one of those things we have to get through. So what is, can you just give us your input, please?
Yeah, well, look, no country's done well at handling this crisis. And I didn't think Zambia would do well either, but actually, I think it's done very well in the circumstances. Unfortunately, we're just going into our peak right now, like coincidentally, just days after our president announced the reopening of the airports. I mean, he didn't have the crystal ball, but like literally days later, out came this news that Zambia's numbers were going up. So they've got to manage this. Nevertheless, it very much looks like we're going to have freedom of travel for tourists. Already visas are being allocated on arrival, but with pre-clearance. If you come with a COVID test negative within 14 days of travel, they are saying you'll be able to have your unrestricted access in around Zambia, which is huge. Now, this document came out yesterday and there are a few gray bits. So I spent most of last night on my groups with government and everyone else saying we need more than the information provided. So don't hold me to this yet. But I do think in the coming days, we'll have that for Zambia. That said, you can only get here on Ethiopian 4 times a week. That said, we are going into our peak. Tomorrow is probably not the time to travel on holiday in Zambia. So we're watching that carefully. Back to your original question. There's not a lot of properties which are open in Zambia. The ones that are really just catering to the local market. So we're getting good practice at how we're all going to reopen, hopefully in a big way in 2021. We're pretty much going by the WTTC protocols. Ministry of Tourism has some additional stuff they want us to apply to, as well as WTTC, as well as WTO. So I do believe that Zambian camps are going to be safe to travel at. Yes, sanitizing, masks, shields, all of that. But we've gone into great detail about even how canoes should be handled, how boats should be handled, how fishing tackle should be handled. A long old list. I've been fortunate or unfortunate to have to sit through all of those Zoom meetings. But rest assured that if travel is possible, you're going to be very safe in Zambia. And then just remember the type of the activity, the camps, they're inherently safe anyway. These camps are generally open. Our vehicles are open. We're not in enclosed safari vehicles. Everything is open. The camps are small. We don't overcrowd on our activities. We're out in the open air. The areas are vast. So it'll be very difficult to get COVID, even if someone was careless or dropped one of the many, many protocols that we're all going to be obliged to follow. Yeah, cut a long story short, Suzanne, I think that's the least of our worries. I hope that people are just able to travel at all next year and that everyone's got enough money to do it.
No, well, Mark, Grant, we're all in the same position over there. And I have to say, as a traveler myself, I would have absolutely no qualm whatsoever going to Zambia. I feel that of all destinations, well, anything generally in Africa, in terms of our vast wilderness areas, it's going to be the most extraordinary place to be getting out to. I think it's just getting to those destinations, which is going to be a stumbling block. Just in wrapping up now, I'd like to start off with Tyrone, and then we're going to go to Mark, and then Fanwell, and end off with Grant. But I want you to give, if you put yourselves into the shoes of our trade partners who are listening to us today, and you would tell them why you would sell Zambia over any other safari destination, because at the beginning of the poll, we had 69% of the listeners today have been and visited Zambia, only 27% of those sell Zambia on a regular basis, and 57% sell at far less than any other destination. So only 27% of today's listeners are selling Zambia on a regular basis and comfortably. What would be your key thing to tell everybody? How would you sell Zambia over any other place? And why do you think selling Zambia will give them a competitive edge in the new safari world? So Tyra, you're going to start that question, and then on to Mark.
I think I've got a tough task to start it with, but I think hopefully what you've picked up from all of us here is how being owner-run, as the majority are, the passion that folk like myself and others that are on here have, is not just for the sake of this Zoom call, but it's also the experience your guests get when they stay at our camps. I speak for myself, we're owner-run, but we're also owner-guided. And so your guests, you know, and yourselves as agents deal with us all the way through the process. So that's not just adds a level of security, but it also shows you that, you know, the depth of experience your guests are going to get in Zambia is going to be, I wouldn't say so much higher than elsewhere, but it's a whole nother dimension. And it really, you know, if you're interested in making your guests' experience as best as possible and have them rebook with you again and again, the amount of repeat visitors in Zambia and repeat clients that we all get is so high. And that's that's not through chance. And so, yeah, if you can get your head around how Zambia works and realize that it's not actually that difficult to piece together a trip in Zambia, once you've chosen your area and your interest, that it will be a great thing to sell and your guests will love it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm totally with you on that. So Mark, over to you on that side. Well, what is your advice to these agents?
My advice is simply that, you know, if you want a completely immersive, touch the wild type experience, and you want to be in some of the wildest parts left in Africa, in some of the smallest camps, then you've got to come to Zambia. We aren't corporate run, as everyone on this panel agrees. We owner run. We have a vested interest in it, a vested interest in the community, the wildlife, which is exceptional, incredible bird life, the scenery, and really it's getting back to the Africa of old. And I think that is what is sorely missing. I think a lot of what has happened in the rest of Africa has become extremely commercialized. And I think walking safaris are one way of doing it. You know, we don't canoe on the Luanga River like Grant does, as an example. There are just too many hippo, too many crocodile. The density of game along these river courses in Africa is really just unparalleled. So you're getting some of the best wildlife experiences left in Africa with some of the friendliest, most down-to-earth staff and people who are passionate about what they do. We do run small camps, and as a result, it's tough to make a living. It's a short season, and we are in very remote areas, which cost a lot of money to manage and look after and run. So we do this because we love the wilderness areas, and we want to protect them, and we want to share them with people. And so the Luanga Valley, the Lower Zambezi, the Kafue National Park, these are some of the best wildlife areas in Africa. And we have small, intimate camps where you can get the most of it, and you become friends with the people in the camps. You get to know them, and you're not just another number and another bed night. So simply put, it's a very exclusive experience in just one of the most beautiful parts left in Africa.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think I just want to jump in. One of the things you said over there, and one of the questions that has come through has been a question being asked here, how do we compare price-wise to Botswana, which has been asked a question from Susan Ragland, one of our key agents in America. And I can say the camps in Botswana, I would say, has a wider variety of camps. You've got a lot of cheaper stuff, but for the level and experience that we're getting in Zambia, the price point in Botswana is higher. I would say that Zambia offers an exceptionally good price pointing, even though your profitability is much lower in Zambia as well. So your passion factor is much higher, profitability lower, and the value for the client, I personally believe, is exceptional. So Fanuel, can I just ask you to give us one thing, quick roundup from your side as to why people should be selling more of Zambia?
Thank you very much. I think most of it has actually been mentioned already by my friends.
Yeah.
It's the abundance and diversity in wildlife that Zambia actually offers, which basically is actually the main magnetic pulling factor to people. I mean, for people to come to Zambia, because within Zambia you can pretty much get everything. The Victoria Falls, which is one of the 7 wonders of the world. To walking safaris, and not only that, but to places like Kasanka National Park, for instance, which is actually the largest mammal migration, which is actually straw-colored fruit bats, and Liua Plains. All those are actually combined together, and they form a huge attraction to the tourists. And for that reason, I would actually sell Zambia. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Grant, I'm going to hand over to you to do a strong wrap up for us now as to why we should be selling more of Zambia. And as you can see, we launched our poll as well, and I will share those results with you as you finish your statement.
Okay, my battery's about to go flat. I hope it doesn't cut out in the middle of my powerful wrap up. I'm going to take a phrase from one of my agents who I chatted to. They said, one of the tips to sell Zambia said, rather do Zambia well than Botswana badly for the same money.
Thank you.
What's to say? If we haven't already said it in the last hour, then you haven't been listening. We've got the vast areas, the wildlife, the habitat, the guides, the camps, the people. It's all there in a low risk from a COVID perspective. We've got relatively good connectivity compared to, say, Botswana. You can get in on Emirates. I saw one question, someone asking how we get in. It's via Emirates. Hopefully their flights will restart up on the 1st of September. They say they will, but let's see. So I don't know what the future is with SAA and South African. It may be that Zambia is better connected than South Africa next year. I hope not, but you never know.
That's quite likely.
Yeah, so wonderful country. And the other thing is, without putting out my begging hand, you are supporting owner-operated operations here. The big corporates aren't here. So if Zambia has a bad year for a big corporate, it's okay. They've got Botswana, South Africa, Kenya, East Africa. For us guys who are only in Zambia, if Zambia has a bad year, Andy, Grant, Tyrone, the Coppingers, Mark, your new investment, we all do badly if Zambia has a bad year. We can't rely on another country to prop us up. And again, we are doing a lot of the conservation ourselves in private-public partnerships with government. The government can't do this on its own. So from a moral perspective, as well as a value perspective, I think Zambia is a wonderful option for those clients of yours who are adventurous enough and are willing to look outside the box.
Fantastic, Grant. Well, I'd like to thank all of the panelists today for joining us. I sincerely appreciate it. And from starting off with 27% selling Zambia on a regular basis, we've ended off with the results of 99% of the viewers today so that they will sell Zambia going forward. So well done to everybody. I sincerely appreciate it. I personally believe, and I've said it before, that I think Zambia is one of the most extraordinary destinations. Tyrone, when I can get a flight, I'm coming to visit. There's no doubt about that. And let's just wrap up today. We will be sending, there will be a recording of today's video available. Quite a few people have asked for that already. And we will also be sending you some itineraries or anything like that. But our team is here to assist anybody wanting to sell Zambia or any other questions that you have, anything that was asked on the chat that wasn't answered. Please to know that myself, Kimmy, Cara are all available here to help you. So I'd like to wrap up and say thank you very much to everybody. I look forward to seeing you when I visit Zambia next. I can't wait to get back. And with that, we're going to say good night.